In this section, we will explore through the fields in C# object-oriented programming. The agenda for this section is first understanding the fields and syntax of field, access modifiers of fields, static fields, constant fields, and read-only fields. What is a field? A field is a variable that is stored inside the object. We have to declare the fields in the class because class is the model of object, but fields are actually stored inside the object. If you take two or more objects of same class, the list of fields of those objects is same. So in this example, both are the objects of same class, that is car. So first we have declared a set of fields inside the class called car, and the same list of fields are available in both of the objects. But here the point is, the data of each object is isolated. That means the data that is stored inside the object is individual for every object. So overall, the fields are details about the object, stored inside the object individually for every object, but fields are declared inside the class. How to create a field? First, we should start with the access modifier. The list of available access modifiers of field are 6. That is private, protected, private protected, internal, protected internal, and public. I will explain the meaning of each modifier in the next slide. And after the access modifier, you can write the modifier. The modifiers of field are 3. But the modifiers are optional. So you may or may not give the modifier for each field. They are static, const, read-only. I will explain about each of these modifiers in the further lectures of the same section. After that, you should give the type name. That can be any primitive type or non-primitive type. That means you can give the primitive types such as sbyte, byte, ushort, short, etc. It can be string, it can be class name, it can be structure name, it can be interface name, it can be delegate name, it can be any possible type. And after that, you should give the name of the field. So access modifier, type, field name. This is the syntax of creating a field inside a class. Whereas the default access modifier is private. That means if you don't specify any access modifier for the field, by default that field is taken as private. The default access modifier of a class is internal, but default access modifier of a field is private. And there is no default modifier because all these modifiers are by default optional. And the type name can be any primitive type such as int, long, double, char, etc. Or it can be string, it can be structure, it can be class, or anything. I am creating a console application called fields example. Deleting the default syntax. I am going to add a class library because I would like to declare the class inside the class library. And I want to reference the same into the console application. It is a good way of programming style to declare all the reusable classes inside the class library instead of writing them in the console application. So right click on the solution, add new project. Then select class library .NET Framework and specify the project name as class library 1 and create. And delete in the default syntax of the class library also. By default, both of the projects don't have any reference. In the console application, you should add the reference to the class library. So right click on the console application, that is fields example, add reference, and go to projects, check the checkbox class library 1, that is the project that we have added before a moment, and then click on OK. So it will add the reference of the compiled file of class library into the console application project. That is the reason all the public classes of the class library 1 are now accessible in the console application itself. So it's a good way of programming to limit the console application only to have the startup class that contains the main method. Define all the reusable classes inside the class library. This is best for understanding the real-time programming style. Suppose we are developing a product management application where you want to store and manipulate the product's details. And assume we have 3 products. So each product is represented as an object. So we have 3 products, so we have 3 objects. Each product has product ID, that is the identification number of the particular product. For example, this is 1001. So these are the details about 3 products, that is 3 objects respectively. So in order to store this data in the program, you have to create a class that contains the 4 fields, that is product ID, product name, cost and quantity in stock. And based on that class, we have to create 3 objects, whereas each object represents a single product. That is, one object that represents a mobile, second object represents a laptop, etc. So I am working in the class library 1. We have a file called class1.cs inside the class library 1. In the class1.cs, I am going to create a class called product, but this must be public class because by default it is internal class, so it is accessible only within the same class library. If you want to make the class accessible to console application, which is a different project in the same solution, you should make the class as a public class. And we have to declare the fields, that is product ID. Here public is an access modifier. The default access modifier is private. Since the private members of the class are not accessible in other classes, I am defining the field as a public field. So the public field is accessible in other classes also. That is the reason this product ID is accessible in other class, which we are going to define in the program.cs file. And of course, the product ID is a field name for which we are going to use the camel case. And in the same way, I am going to declare the product name, which is of string type, and also cost. It can have decimal places, so I am giving the data type as double, and quantity. So these are the fields. It is not a good way to initialize the fields inside the class itself. That means assigning some default value like this is not a good way because the declaration of the fields is going to be common for all the objects. So if you are initializing a field, the same value will be stored in every object, which is not correct as per the expectation because every object should have isolated data. So that is the reason, even though it is possible, it is not a good way to initialize a field inside the class itself directly. But alternatively, you can initialize the fields inside a constructor of the class, or you can initialize the fields in the main method itself. Currently, as of now, we are not going to discuss about constructor in this section. So let me create the objects inside the main method and initialize the fields in that main method. So go to the program.cs of the console application, creating a class called sample. It can be any other name, for example, program or anything. You must have static void main, which is the entry point of the program or starting execution point of the program. I want to create objects. So first we have to create the reference variables for the product class. Since the product class is already the public class, it is accessible directly. If it is internal class, it cannot be accessible in the main method because we are in a different project. So overall, the product class is declared in the class library 1, but we are accessing the same in the console application project. Let us declare two reference variables. Remember, these two are not objects, these two are just reference variables. That means a variable that can store the reference of an object. So you cannot access any of the field or any of the method through these reference variables. You have to create objects. Product 1 assigns to new product. Product 2 assigns to another new product. And in the same way, product 3 also. So we have created three individual objects. So in heap memory, these three objects are stored like this. But the default values of the fields are respectively 0, null, 0 and 0. These default values are common for all the objects. So currently the product ID is 0, product name is null, cost is 0, and quantity also 0 for all the three objects. Because as per the data types of C#, for all the numerical types the default value is 0, for string the default value is null. Now let us initialize the fields. Actually, the good place to initialize the fields is a constructor. I will explain about constructors in the further sections. So time being, let us initialize the fields in the main method itself. So I want to initialize the field that is product ID of the first object. So I should write like product1 dot product ID equal to something. By looking at this statement, you may think that product ID is stored inside the product1, but which is not correct. Here product1 is the reference variable that stores the reference of the object. So in the same way, product2 is the reference variable that refers to the second object, and in the same way third object. But what I'm saying is that the objects are stored inside the heap. The reference variables, that is product1, product2, product3, are stored in the stack of the main method. If the method is called another time, another stack will be created, but the heap remains same through the end of the application. So in the same way, I'm going to initialize the remaining fields. So in this case, the default values, that is 0, null, 0, 0, are respectively replaced with the values that you initialize. So we have initialized all the fields based on the data that we have shown here. Now finally, let us print the data of all the fields. If you want to get the value from the field, just we should write the reference variable dot field. So this will return the value of the particular field of the particular object, that is 1001 in this case. You may wonder why we are not reading the data from the keyboard. You can simply read the data from the keyboard by using readLine method of the console class. But in every program, if you are using readLine, in future it may lead to some confusion. For understanding the concept properly, it is good and safe way to initialize the fields directly in the program itself instead of reading the data from keyboard. It is not a big deal to get the data from keyboard. I will show how to do it in the further sections. So timing, I am displaying the product ID of the first object. Then before the value of the field, I am going to concatenate the string, that is product ID, for understanding that the value is the product ID. Plus is a concatenation operator, right? So this is a string and this is another number. So this string value and number will be concatenated and produced as a single string. So we are displaying the data of all the objects. And I am using the \n, which is escape sequence character, which is used to go to next line. So overall, in the class library, we have created a class with 4 fields that describes the data that you want to store inside the object. And in the console application project, in the main method, we have created 3 reference variables to store the addresses of 3 respective objects. The new product will create an object, and we are going to store the object reference in a variable that is product1. The product1 is not the object name, it is the name of the reference variable only, using which we can access the object. Because if product1 is object, product1 must be stored in the heap, right? But it is not. Product1 is just reference variable that is only stored in the stack, which is used to access the object. So initializing all the fields and also displaying the data of all the fields. And we got the output from all the 3 objects. This is the basic way how to declare the fields, how to use them. In the next lecture, I will explain about access modifiers of fields.